So welcome and good afternoon. We are having sunny skies here in Des Moines, so we're pretty excited about that. Let me share my screen here. And this is just the agenda for today's call. We're going to just walk through the process for submitting your renewal for ICAPP contracts, kind of go through some of the forms, and we'll have some time for questions. I do also want to point out for folks that most of the PCA Iowa webinars and trainings, if they're done like via Zoom or via webinar, we do ask folks to register for those. On the Eventbrite site, we have some requirements for reporting training and things like that. And the Eventbrite site allows us to make sure folks are getting the invites and the materials, and then it helps us track participation, so we're not having to take roll call for everybody every time we're on a webinar. And then usually we send out stuff like a day or two in advance. So if you're registering 5 minutes before the call, you may not get all of those automatic updates because those do go out in advance. So we'll go ahead and get started. And like I said, if you do have questions as we're going along, feel free to type stuff in the chat box. And Lisa, if you would be so kind as to help kind of monitor that chat box if something pops up and I don't see it, that would be wonderful.
I can do it.
All right. So just kind of a general overview of what we expect contracts to look like for FY 2020 compared with the current year's contracts. We will be issuing renewal amendments for folks. If you've ever been able to do renewals through just a simple renewal letter, unfortunately, we aren't able to do that this year because we do have a couple of changes that are going to affect all of the contracts, regardless of whether or not you're proposing any changes to your project. So the first of those general changes, really pretty minor. The address for PCA Iowa, as most of you know, has changed. So we will be updating that in the contract template. We also have had a change over at the Department of Human Services with the contract owner. So it used to be Wendy Rickman. It's now going to be, why am I having a mind freeze? Jana
Rhodes.
Thank you. Oh gosh. And so those things will be updated in the contract. And then also, we're going to be doing a slight change to the wording on the training performance deliverable for all of the ICAPP contracts. Right now, it is set up that it's required to attend in person the fall regional meetings. And then there is one webinar that has required attendance to attend live, and then 2 additional webinars that can be attended either live or by watching the recorded webinar. We are doing away with the requirement for that webinar for all webinars, for any of them to be attended live. So all of the webinars that will be offered that will be required, you'll be able to attend live or you'll be able to watch the recording. So just watch for that change in that section. The deliverable that references training should make things a little bit more flexible for folks. If you have questions on that, let me know. And those are all of the changes that are going to impact all of the contracts. Changes that might impact other contracts would be if contractors are requesting to update any information. So if you have a change to your contract manager, your billing manager, or the contact information for any of those folks, we're going to ask that you identify that on the renewal request form. And so,
hey, Abby, can I pop in here real quick?
Yep.
So this is Lisa over at DHS. And in case anyone's wondering, even if you have let us know over the course of the last year, so you had a contract manager or billing change, and we appreciate you letting us know, but sometimes, tracking on all those individual emails or whatever, basically we want to know if it's different than it was on the original contract. So even if you've already let us know, please make sure that that section of that request form for renewal is filled out so that we can make sure that your contract amendment has the most accurate, up-to-date contact information.
Thanks, Lisa. And I'm going to put that up. Okay. That one. Sorry about that. I do have the renewal request form. Let me make sure I'm sharing that with folks. Here we go. Okay, so that's the information you should see on your screen is what Lisa was talking about, changes to that contract manager, billing manager, or contact information. And like Lisa said, you'll want to check your original contract that would have been signed last July or last June to make sure that all of those items are still accurate. If they've changed through the year, we still will need to change them in the renewal amendment. Okay, so going through this form, there should just be a fill in the blank. You should be able to type in for all of the fields. If you have any of the changes for contacts, you'll click in the request to renew contract with changes and then just identify what those changes are. If you'd like to renew your contract with no changes, everything is exactly the same as what's already in the executed contract, then you'll click request to renew contract with no changes. Uh-oh, sorry.
Yeah, we just lost your share.
I know. I'll pull it back up. And
well, you're working on that. I will say, and you might have had this in your presentation, but I'm going to chime in now. There have been just some changes in processes here with getting sign-offs and some internal processes. So it used to be that we could get contract amendments or contracts back and get them signed and effective pretty quickly, but due to some changes in our fiscal management process, we really need to get our amendments back sooner this year. So there'll be more information about that. We'll give you, deadlines or what have you, but I just want people to be aware that we can't turn things around quite as quickly as we used to. We have to have some additional sign-offs here internally before we're able to finalize on our end. So we need the signed contracts back probably a couple weeks before they would go into effect. So we'll when we get there, we'll give you, deadlines, but I just want people to be aware of that. It used to be that we could, try to get them signed within a day or two, and we're not going to be able to do that anymore. So, yeah.
All right. Thank you. I was going to touch just a little bit on the process once we get renewals out, but thanks for touching on that. Okay, so with the renewal request form, hopefully everybody is able to see that now. So if you want to request to renew your contract without any changes at all, you'll select the request to renew contract with no changes. And then if you are requesting not to renew, or you're not requesting renewal for next year, we want to know that as well. So that would be the other option there. And then we want to know who that contact person is. So who's filling out that renewal request, that email and phone. We want to make sure we have all of those contacts up to date. And then we're just asking you return those to PCA Iowa. You can either mail them, mail in a hard copy, or you can email them to apatterson@pcaiowa.org. That's my email address. And we're asking for those no later than April 12th. we want to be able to pull all of our information together and have plenty of time. And then if we have questions, we want to make sure we have questions or time for, if we have questions that we can get back to you if there's any changes that need to be negotiated. So with returning, if you do have changes, so we do have an attachment 3.1 or an attachment 3.2, and the 3.1, I will pull that up as well. That one, here we go. Should be filled out only if you have changes to your scope of work. So if you're wanting to change your projected outputs for 2020, if you want to change like the type of curricula you're offering, or here we go. Hopefully everybody can see that. You're wanting to change your curricula, you're wanting to change your outputs, or any other significant changes to how you've outlined you're going to be performing this project, you'll fill out this. And again, I will say that both the 3.1 and the 3.2 attachments in the top right corner do have a space for you to put your contract number. Please remember to put your contract number in there. Definitely helps us keep everything straight and make sure we aren't putting the wrong paperwork in the wrong file. So then for these, we want a narrative of what those changes are in section 1. And then in section 2, that would be if you do have changes to your outputs. Whatever your project type, if you want to fill out the table for that project type and then delete all the other tables, you're welcome to do that. And then I will also pull up here the 3.2 awarded budget for if you'd like to revise your project's budget. If you don't have any changes to either the budget or the scope of work, you don't need to fill these out if everything is still the same. But if there are changes, we do want both the new line items for your project, and then also we do need to make sure that we're getting the other budget information. So if you've had changes to your other funding sources, or the way that you're applying different funding sources to different parts of the project, we do need updates on those as well. Once you have completed your project budget form, if needed, and your scope of work, if that one is needed, we have one additional form that we are asking everybody to complete, regardless if you have changes or not. And that would be the council membership form. Part of this is just to try to keep updated on who's got council representations for which areas, and what does that council composition look like for folks. There is on page 2 of this form, this is just pulled right out of the RFP, but going over the different required representations and who examples of who can fill each one of those. Just as a reminder, each council person should only be covering one of those representations. So if somebody is a mental health provider and they're a parent, it's really most appropriate for them to be covering the mental health representation. They can't serve as both. And generally people go by what is their primary professional affiliation if they could cover more than one area. Okay, timeline for requests. Once this information is all completed, like I said, that can be sent to me or the PCA Iowa office by April 12th. And then kind of looking a little bit what the process looks like from there. In the month of April, among other things, we'll be looking at those third quarter benchmarks to see how folks are performing on on their projects. And then we'll be meeting in mid-May with the advisory committee, at which point we'll be talking about how folks are doing, and we'll be talking about those renewal decisions. And then shortly after that mid-May meeting, I believe it's the 14th, but I don't have my calendar in front of me, we'll be getting contracts out or contract amendments out for folks that are being renewed. I've had quite a few questions about will we be renewed, or we're maybe a little bit short in one area. Generally speaking, if folks are within compliance for their benchmarks in their contract, generally they've been renewed. I always say that, barring no significant disruptions in funding, which we don't have any of those planned at this point, or we're not aware of any of those at this point. And then generally in the past, the advisory committee, if folks have been pretty close on meeting those outputs and their deliverables, the advisory committee has recommended renewing those projects. If there's projects that are having some more significant problems meeting all of their outputs and deliverables, at that May meeting, that's kind of when we'll talk about some of those projects that may be struggling, and maybe it's possible that the advisory committee would recommend a program improvement plan. Okay, but we won't really know until we meet with the advisory committee. I did see a question just pop up about where folks can find renewal forms. If you have not gotten renewal forms, let me know, Patty. I will send them to you, or I'll forward them to you. I did send them out to everybody on my list, and that includes anybody who's listed as a contract manager for a current ICAPP project, and then anybody else that has said that they want to be on the ICAPP mailing list. So yeah, if there's anybody else that doesn't have these documents and needs them, just let me know and I'll get them sent out. Any other questions? Yes, Chris, I will send them your way as well. Okay. Is this being recorded? Yes, this is being recorded. Yep. For anybody who was not able to attend in person. Great. The other thing that I wanted to touch on briefly, I've just, this is, I guess, kind of related, but I've had a lot of questions about kind of who's responsible for what, as far as if the council is responsible, if the provider is responsible. And I just wanted to walk through that a little bit at a high level, because there has been a change this past year. It used to be that only the councils could contract for ICAPP funds. Now the councils still are required to be involved as far as being eligible to apply and receive funds, but they can delegate that contract so that the ICAPP funds are being contracted through DHS directly with that provider for whoever's providing that service, because that's a change that's causing a little bit of confusion for some folks. So I just wanted to kind of walk through that a little bit. If the council is the entity listed on the contract, they are still technically the person who is responsible for that project. And it's understood that if they're not the ones providing it, that they're subcontracting with a provider. So in terms of if there's a problem with the project, or if something needs to be completed, like a training is required for the contract, that's one of those things that it's kind of up to the local folks as far as who does it, but ultimately the contractor on the contract is the one that is responsible for seeing that that gets done. Conversely, if there's a council in the picture, but the contract is directly between DHS and a provider, the provider becomes that responsible party for that contract. They can still work with a council. If there's a training webinar that they feel is, it's maybe most appropriate for somebody from the council to attend, as long as that's getting completed, it's the responsibility of whoever's listed on the contract. But it's really up to that local group, to kind of decide what works best for them to make sure things get done. When they're a designated contractor, we've asked the council to still sign the contract to support that work. There are some contract deliverables that are really specific to maintaining a council and what the composition of that council looks like. Because of the code language with ICAPP, having to have that volunteer council or coalition, that's kind of why we've had the council sign off on those contracts, just to really demonstrate their support with helping to meet those expectations. If there's ever questions about what that looks like in your local area or how things are getting done or how that applies to your contract, definitely feel free to let me know. I can walk with folks and help kind of walk through that contract language with you. Aside from that, we know that that's been kind of confusing and that there has been a change. So when there's questions about that, don't hesitate to reach out. Okay, that basically covers what I wanted to cover in this webinar, and I just also wanted to make sure folks had the opportunity to ask any other questions. Okay, I'm not seeing anything. I will let folks know, beginning tomorrow afternoon, I'm out of the office until April 1st. I will have access to email, so the best way to ask me questions would be through email after tomorrow. You still have a couple weeks if there's anything after that I'll be back in the office. Annette will also be in the office, amansime@pcaiowa.org, or our office line, 515-244-2200, extension 5. If you do want to talk to a live person and I'm not in the office, she will be available as well. Otherwise, I'm not seeing any other questions. So Lisa Bender, did you have anything else to add?
Maybe you already said this, but I don't recall hearing it. I just want to remind people again that, so with contracts, when you get that initial contract, it's like about a 30-page document, and then when you get this amendment, just a reminder, they're usually pretty short, so it's a couple pages basically just highlighting the changes from the original contract. So once we get through all of this and we have the list of everybody who wants to renew their contract, and if they have any changes, and we have a meeting with the advisory committee to approve any changes or to discuss any program improvement plans or what have you, then you will be getting those draft amendments. And like I said, they are a shorter document, but they do need to be signed and they do need original signatures still. Yes, we are one of the state agencies that is still requiring that we get an original signature back. So again, as I was talking about that timeline being a little bit shorter than what we're used to, well, longer really, we need them back sooner. So just kind of keep that in mind, maybe as you're scheduling your council meetings or thinking about who you have to have sign off on those documents, that once you get those documents, I'm guessing mid to late May-ish, that you're going to have probably a quick turnaround time with like a couple weeks to get them back to us signed. And we do need the originals. when it's come down to it, we've been able to take a signed, a scanned version just to get it executed. But ultimately, we still have to have that original in hand for the contract to be effective. So just a reminder to people, because yes, a lot of agencies now, you can do an electronic signature. For most things, as you know, we've gone to billing, we've actually allowed it, but for contracts being a legal document, until we hear otherwise, our direction has been an original signed copy.
Thanks, Lisa. Anything else I missed?
I don't think so. If anyone has questions, let us know. This is the time. We try to make this process as easy as possible. Really, if nothing's changed, it's a couple of forms, and then hopefully we'll be able to get out your amendment. If there are requested changes, we basically just have to kind of take a look at those and see what is the magnitude of those, and make sure it still sort of aligns with the general scope of the procurement. And whenever we can, we try to work with people. And yeah, that's really all I got.
All right. Well, I know we were scheduled from 1 to 2, but hopefully nobody's going to complain if we're getting done significantly early.
I will do one plug for next week. Next Tuesday, we have another webinar. If you're available to participate live, awesome. If not, I hope you try to catch the recording. We are having Deb Covington, who is our oh gosh, I'm gonna blunder her title. It's like the privacy and security officer, and Brad Horn, who is an assistant attorney general, going over some basic kind of HIPAA stuff. I think in the family support world, we're not as immersed in privacy and security stuff as some of you who may come from more of a medical background are, but there's just some things to think about, especially as we've moved to different data systems and shared data systems, like things like DAISY, and just things to think about in the family support realm and how it impacts how HIPAA and how DHS funding is maybe a little bit different than public health funding or early childhood funding. So I think it's going to be a really helpful and informative webinar, and so hopefully you're able to participate or at least catch the recording of that later. And I think there was one more question that came through about where will there be an email of the link to the recording of this webinar for those that may have missed a few minutes.
Yes, we will email out the link. Should be out by midday tomorrow, if not end of day today.
Perfect.
And Lisa, just to piggyback on what you were talking about with the HIPAA webinar, that one is one of the required webinars. So if there's folks on the call that aren't going to catch that one, there should be somebody from every area project that is representing on that one. And that is the last required webinar for the year, or for the fiscal year.
And again, as Abby said, that it will be recorded and made available. And I think it'll be really useful regardless of your role. Just some general stuff about, there's just so many things that I have in working with those two individuals in my organization learned about privacy, security, when you must encrypt things, email. I mean, just those things that in the world of technology, we just don't always, technology can be very useful, but obviously with it comes some challenges too. So I think regardless of what your role is, you should find that useful and helpful. Someone asked about the HIPAA webinar info. Will it be emailed again? So yep. Like the info to register? Is that what we're?
Yep, I can get that emailed out. Oh, there you go.
Oh, awesome. Look at Scott. So that in the chat box right now, if you are looking for that, you can, the Eventbrite link was just put in. Thank you, Scott. So if you can register for that now, go for it. Otherwise, yes, there'll be a recording of that too. Any other questions? I suppose that means you've done your job well, Abby.
Going once, going twice. All right, I'm going to stop recording.